cell division. Now, as always, if it's red, it's important. Okay, now you can see here straight away, you don't need to write this down, but it is a pretty good summary, that there can be one parent reproduction and two parent reproduction, which you're probably pretty familiar with. Okay, but obviously asexual reproduction, if you've watched the podcast, is where an organism just reproduces itself. Okay, and the offspring will be identical to the parent because it only has one set of DNA to pass on. Yes, so the offspring will be a copy of the parent. But in sexual reproduction, you get the offspring is not. I can't use the word blend, because that's an old way of describing offspring from sexual reproduction. But I think you would appreciate that DNA from both parents would contribute to the offspring. And that's why you might have your mother's eyes but your father's hair, or vice versa. Yes, you've got these different attributes, or you're like a combination of your parents, because you're carrying DNA from parents. Remembering DNA is the molecule of genetic inheritance. Okay, that's the thing that passes from parent to children. And for most of human history, people weren't stupid. If you took a person from 50,000 years ago as a baby, so open a time portal, grab a baby, it's unethical, but let's do it. Whip them back here, throw them in a classroom from an early age, they would achieve just as well as you would. Okay, just because people 50,000 years ago were ignorant of things doesn't mean that they were less intelligent. And so people have known, obviously, that parents and children, parents are passing on attributes and characteristics to their children, but they didn't know what was responsible for that. And it wasn't until 1953 that Watson and Crick were definitively able to show the structure of DNA that, it was confirmed, around about this period, that DNA is the molecule of inheritance. So DNA does two things. It makes proteins, because you're just a big bag of proteins. It doesn't make them. It has the information for the machines that make the proteins, the ribosomes. Yeah? So it handles the proteins, and it carries genetic information from between generations. Sexual reproduction is advantageous. Why is it advantageous? It's more energy. What about all this running around, mating rituals, everything like that? It takes a lot of energy. That's calories, that's food. So it does take more energy for sexual reproduction, but what are the advantages of it from an evolutionary perspective? Any ideas? Yeah?
If there's a disease, it won't wipe out the whole thing, the DNA.
Yeah. Imagine if any asexual method of reproduction, all the offspring are copies of the parent. So if a virus was to come through and the immune system of the parent couldn't handle it, neither could the immune system of any of the offspring, because they're copies of the parent. Yeah? Whereas with sexual reproduction, you get this mixing up of genetics. Okay? And so you look at a big herd of wildebeest, and they're not all copies of each other. Some have short legs, some have long legs, some can run really fast in straight lines, some are a little bit slower, but they corner better. They have all these different characteristics and attributes. And so some of them are better at avoiding lions, some of them are tougher when it comes to disease, some of them are more drought tolerant, some of them have slightly longer hair. Not a great advantage in Africa, but boom, volcano goes off and everything cools down, and oh my goodness, that was lucky. Okay, and so the longer haired one might survive better in that cooler environment. There's all these different things that happen with sexual reproduction. So that's why it's an advantage. Okay, but for the longest time, for most of the history of this planet, it was just bacteria and archaea, and it was asexual reproduction. Just ticking over. Here are our key learning intentions. Sexual and asexual reproduction. Okay, discuss differences in cell division of different cell types. So bacteria and yeast. Yeast is a single-celled fungi, so it's one of the 6 kingdoms, by binary fission and other cells which carry out mitosis. Discuss that mitosis is a type of cell division essential for growth and repair. Okay, your cells are doing that all the time. Okay, growth, when this skin cell's getting a bit manky, and it'll make a copy of itself, and then it'll just shrivel and fall off. Okay, and that happens all the time. Your stomach lining is replaced every 2 weeks. Okay, it takes some big hits. It's necessary because you've got that acidic environment. Okay, so you are rebuilding yourself. Have you heard of the ship of Theseus?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, here's my favourite analogy, okay? Imagine I made a teleporting machine, yes?
Yep.
So I've got one end here, and the other end in, we'll just say Paris. Okay. Now, if you step into the teleporter, the machine will tear you apart down to the level of your atoms, but quickly, you won't feel anything. It'll be instantaneous as far as you're concerned. It'll tear you down to 37 trillion atoms. It will map the positions of all of the atoms. It will beam that information to Paris, and then the machine there, using carbon, hydrogen and oxygen that it has available to it, will remake you exactly the same as you step out. And that will all occur in well under a second. You walk in, and then you're out in Paris. Would you step into the machine? No. Why not?
Just a quick question. The memories...
Everything is the same, so memories are intact.
Okay.
So, would you step into the machine? He said no. Why?
Because it's not natural.
Okay, it's not natural. Neither's driving in the car. You're doing 110 kilometres an hour. Cheetahs are looking at that going, that's not natural.
Like in lazy
Okay.
cars.
Yes, because it's a faster way of transport and it doesn't do anything to our bodies, just taking apart our atoms, but this just sounds really bad, but it just takes apart your atoms and just puts them back into another machine.
Well, Joanna, you look perturbed.
I probably wouldn't step in because I wouldn't be sure it was me because it wouldn't be the exact same atoms.
Is it, well, no, they're not the same atoms, but in terms of memories and everything like that, indistinguishable from you. But you're right.
Would that be me or would it be someone
Is it
else?
you or is it a copy of you?
Yeah.
I mean, that machine, if you hit replay, it could pump out another copy of you. It's got the code there. It carries the code. Hit that button 50 times. Okay.
Wow. No one would
Yes.
What would it do with the atoms of your original?
Oh, you just store them in the machine. Make another person.
That'd be awesome.
And someone comes back the other way. But I think some of you appreciate that, hang on, that's not really you, that's just a copy of you, yeah? But that's already happening to you every 7 years. You're not you, okay? While the cells in your brain, because they tend to stick around, the cells in your brain are you, but the neural connections that make up your memories get pruned at regular intervals. And that's why you're not sitting here obsessing about My Little Pony and wanting a Barbie doll. Because that version of you is gone. The cells that made up the 7-year-old you, they're all gone except for brain cells, and the connection between those brain cells have been fragmented for a large part. So when you're in 7 years' time, you'll be concerned about other things, and the version that is you now will fundamentally be gone.
I think that's better for everyone in my case.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Maybe we should just put
you are already stepping into the machine. Students need to understand the following: DNA, sexual versus asexual, binary fission, mitosis. Those are these are the testable things, and will be tested next week. Discuss that the daughter cell arising from mitosis is genetically identical to each other and the parent cell. Okay, and we will talk about all of this. I showed you this the other day. We said DNA carries genetic information. It's responsible for genetic inheritance. Okay, DNA is self-replicating and in all organisms packaged in a chromosome or chromosomes. Okay, I should add a little bit more on that. I might just do that because DNA, of course, is.
You didn't hear like the.
Does the egg actually glow blue once the sperm enters
No.
it?
No, of course not.
Oh my god.
Makes the egg radioactive.
Okay, those are the key things we're talking about. You'll notice the C up in the corner is for cram code. DNA also codes for proteins. Okay, so it's got those two jobs, and the ribosomes are what produce the proteins. Now, hopefully you've got that in your notes from a previous slideshow. It should have done, because in the previous slideshow in the podcast we looked at DNA. Reproduction, the production of offspring by sexual or asexual process or processes. Parent DNA is passed to the offspring during the process. Okay? In sexual reproduction, specialised cells, one from each parent, combine. Offspring have copies of DNA from both parents. And that's what's happening in this graphic here. You'll notice only one sperm fertilises the egg. Because you'll do this in year 10, so we're jumping the gun a little bit. Humans have 46 chromosomes and about 25,000 genes. That number flicks around. 46 chromosomes carrying about 25,000 genes. You get 23 chromosomes from each parent. So the sperm carries 23 and the egg carries 23 for a total of 46. So all of the cells in your body carry 46 chromosomes except for sex cells, which carry 23. So that when a sex cell meets a sex cell, they come together and the total goes to 46 again. Yes?
I was watching a documentary the other day how if two sperm enter the egg at the same time, the egg can die instead.
Yeah, it won't. Because you've got, at that stage, what are you running? You've got it's not even trisomy is the term. Trisomy is when you have 3 copies of one chromosome, and that usually causes problems, but not always. So Down syndrome, for example, is trisomy 21, when you have 3 copies of chromosome 21. But yeah, 3 copies of all chromosomes would be fatal, effectively. Can I change?
Yeah.
So if you've done podcast 5 and you've got this information, well done you. You don't have to write things down twice. I'm quite happy for you to have your podcast notes open and going, oh yeah, I missed a little bit there. I'll add a bit more information. So Jamie, you will need to take notes. Okay. Now, sexual reproduction, where offspring arise from combining from 2 eukaryotic multicellular individuals of different types. Now, I put eukaryotic there because you only have sexual reproduction with eukaryotes. So that's, what are the 4 kingdoms of eukaryotes? Animals, plants, fungi and protists. Yeah.
What are protists?
Oh, they're everything in the ponds that you see that aren't bacteria or archaea. Okay. So those are your kingdoms that are engaging in sexual reproduction, but some fungi, single-celled fungi, produce asexually as well. In asexual reproduction, offspring arise from a single organism and inherit the genes from that parent only. Offspring is genetically identical to the single parent cell. Only one parent needed. Offspring are produced quickly. Offspring are a clone of the parent in a real sense, used by single-cell prokaryotes and eukaryotes. It doesn't happen to multicellular organisms, binary fission. Okay, I don't just stand there and go, and another version of me just slides out the side.
That'd be awesome.
I've got 37 trillion cells. It only happens for single-celled organisms. Now, there are some odd ways of doing asexual reproduction that aren't binary fission. Okay, like parthenogenesis. You'll study that if you do year 11 biology, where you get turkeys. Every 40,000th turkey comes from an egg that has not been fertilised. And I told you that last class. I was telling you about different oddities that can happen. We missed a number of terrifying stories.
It was awesome.
No, it wasn't. It was scary.
It was scarifying. Yes.
No.
So you will. I should write a short story called The Lump.
The lump.
No.
Stephen King already beat me to it. The Dark Half is when a man goes to hospital, and I think he's a young man at that stage, and they suspect scans indicate a growth in his brain, and when they operate on him, they find an eye, human eye and some teeth from his absorbed twin, and they remove it and don't tell him, and then his life starts to unravel when he's an adult, and it turns out the ghost of his twin brother is haunting him and wants revenge for being.
It's like, you removed my teeth.
Yes. So there you go. So you're just wondering about this now, aren't you?
It's like,
You read that.
The Dark Half. Stephen King writes beautiful books. Yeah, it is terrifying, but the story is about the beautiful relationship between these 12-year-old children in the face of this overwhelming challenge, which is this evil entity. And it's only their love for each other that makes them strong enough to even contemplate confronting that. But it's quite scary.
everything around you.
Now, can I change? So you can put that information into a table, okay? and break it down, or you could do something like this. This really, the Venn diagram does cover it pretty well. Show me your podcast. You cannot get through this. You have
I'm just like writing it down.
Yeah. Okay, so just on the fly. Yeah. And I have to put the answers up. Otherwise, it's just going to some people. Take some notes.
Hang on, wait, Mr. Maz.
Yes.
If that twin in the story you were talking about actually consumed him when he was just a handful of cells, then how would the ghost remember to have revenge on him? Because
You don't have good stories if you delve into it too logically. Yeah. Now, can I change? Yes. Change.
Yeah.
Okay. You can always come back. You can always check the what is going to not be quite a podcast, but the video of the class as well.
provided it's going to be honest.
But you can see it's always eukaryotic, multicellular, and it takes time. They're a blend of the parents, and it's two eukaryotic parents. So those are the key points. You do need to know those differences. There's no getting around that. Okay. Now, we can always come back to it at the end as well, but I'll just stop the camera at that stage. Binary fission means dividing in half. Cell replication by division leads to two identical daughter cells, each having a copy of the parent cell's DNA or chromosome. Now, what's happening here? I've simplified this. The podcast is not too bad, but here's your single-celled organism. Okay, in this case, prokaryotic. Okay, now duplication of the chromosome and separation of the copies. So you've got these copies. This isn't the best picture in the world. I've sent better pictures. These chromosome copies are actually attached to the cell membrane. Now, when the cell gets longer, the copies are separated from each other. Do you understand that idea?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get division. The cell membrane and the cell wall work their way down, and you get that division. Or that's happening here, and then, yes.
And they are different.
No, they're not. They're completely identical. They're absolutely identical. That's binary fission. Two identical daughter cells.
In the podcast of cell division, though, it says mitosis.
This is mitosis. This is binary fission.
Well, it said on the podcast.
This is binary fission. You're talking about mitosis.
I know it's binary fission,
Yeah.
except in mitosis, it said that it results in two daughter cells, each having the same number and kind of chromosomes as the parent cell.
Right. But this is binary fission. So why are you talking about mitosis?
Because it's the exact, because according
Ah,
to the
different
notes, it's
processes.
exactly the same thing.
Different processes. Prokaryotes.
Yeah.
Okay. Mitosis. We'll look on the next slide.
Right. Okay.
But you do get, because because you have a single parent, any process that has a single parent will produce a clone of the parent. Any process. So if in mitosis or binary fission, it will always produce a copy of the parent. Okay? So that's what's happening there. The reason why I emphasize these steps is because you could be asked a question along the lines of, well, what's the difference between binary fission and mitosis? Yeah? And a simple answer to that would be, well, binary fission is how prokaryotes reproduce. That is very true. Okay? Whereas what was I going to say? Mitosis occurs in all eukaryotic cells. It's happening all through my body at this time, and yours as well, where any cell that has to make a copy of itself uses mitosis to do that. Okay? Now, can I change? Prokaryotes, bacteria and archaea, and eukaryotic yeasts use binary fission to reproduce asexually. So don't forget that it's prokaryotes and eukaryotes, whereas mitosis is only occurring in eukaryotic cells. Okay? So that is an important difference as well. Okay. Can I change? No? Try to get those steps. That is the shortest version of those notes I could make, I think. Each copy attaches to the cell membrane at one end of the cell. Cell grows longer. The copies are separated at each end of the cell. Then cell membrane and wall deposited across the midsection, and now you have two copies. Okay? And they're classed as daughter cells, but if you're looking closely, one of them was the original cell. That one there that one there makes a copy of its own DNA. So that's that DNA, and that's the copy. So that one is the original cell.
So
But we
it's,
say daughter
it's
cells.
mother and daughter.
It was really a mother and a daughter, but we just say daughter cells. But it is the original cell. And that one may subsequently die shortly thereafter, or it might go on to make more copies. Okay, bacteria are very, very efficient for what they do. Okay, I mentioned before that if you leave E. coli alone, can I give you the number?
What is it?
I did the math, and I worked out that you have 37 trillion cells in your body, and E. coli are 1,000 times less volume per cell, so you'd have to have 37 trillion times 1,000, so that's 37,000 trillion E. coli cells to make up one person in size, yeah? And if you left E. coli alone for 2 days, just 2 days, infinite food, waste not an issue, you'd have 15 billion people made out of E. coli for every human on the planet.
Every single human on the planet.
Yes, so 7 billion times 15 billion. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we do have. I forgot the roll. Sorry, we've gone straight. I'll do it. Sorry, I've made you walk a long way too. Okay, I'll freeze that screen. Okay, has everyone finished that?
Yeah.
Okay. I should have frozen the screen and marked. Now this is mitosis, so we'll talk through this. Then I'll mark the roll, or you take some notes. Eukaryotic cell replication by division. 2 identical daughter cells, each having a copy of the parent cell's chromosomal chromosomes. So you'll notice again, mitosis is single cell, but it's only eukaryotes, and you get an exact copy. But look at the difference in how things happen. Now, you don't need to know metaphase, anaphase, telophase, prophase. You don't need to know those specific terms. But look at the way the difference works. We have our individual cell, and there's our nucleus there, and you'll notice multiple chromosomes. And they've actually formed little X shapes. So each of those chromosomes has made a copy of itself. And then they line up across the middle of the cell. Okay, these spindle fibres attach to the centre of the chromosomes, which is called the centromere, and then they sort of reel the copies in to each end of the cell. And then, so now you've got this establishment of a single cell, if you like, with 2 copies of the original DNA, and then it divides down the middle, and you've got 2 cells. So it's significantly more complicated. Many chromosomes make copies. Spindle fibres pull chromosome copies to different ends of the cell. Cell membrane deposit across midsection. So the same sort of finishing step, but the process is significantly more complicated. Now I'm just going to mark this roll quickly. Let's go. Yes. No dash. Okay. Sarah, Jacob, Joanna, Curtis. Okay, now, very importantly, this is not for reproduction. It's primarily for growth and repair. So why do we use mitosis? Eukaryotic cells, growth, repair. Binary fission, eukaryotic and prokaryotic single cells and single-celled organisms, reproduction. That's it in a nutshell. I'll say that again. This mitosis is eukaryotic multicellular organisms, growth and repair. This is what you're doing to grow. Binary fission is for single-celled eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells for reproduction. So remember, when sperm meets egg, you're one cell. And by the time you reach an adult, you're 37 trillion cells. You're not just one big cell, really, really big by that stage. You're 37 trillion cells. So how did you go from 1 to 37 trillion over the course of about 18 years?
Division.
16 years? Mitosis, 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 mitosis. Okay? And it's actually like building a sandcastle in the surf. Because, of course, you know, you're losing cells all the time as well. Hundreds of millions of them a day. So you're having to replace the ones that you had at the start of the day and make extra ones. A lot of energy, takes time. Okay, but that's why we have an interesting planet, where we don't just have, you know, a little bit of colour on the edge of the water and single-celled organisms. You know, we've got multicellular. Can I change? Eukaryotic organisms use meiosis to produce sex cells. We don't study meiosis at this level. Okay, so it kind of looks similar to that. Okay, mitosis. But yes, that's how studied in Year 10 science. Okay. Can I change?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. That might well be the end of the slideshow, and it is. So let's have. Hang on, that hasn't changed. I think I'm still on freeze. There we go. So binary fission. DNA is replicated. Simple process. That's not enough information, of course. Binary fission. So you should just put some on. DNA is replicated. Simple process. Daughter cells are clones of the parent cell, and eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. Whereas mitosis is eukaryotic cells only, used for growth and repair, and you have, what was the other thing? Yeah, growth, repair, eukaryotic cells, multicellular organisms only. Okay? And those are your key differences.